afternoon. I'm Bill Waldron, one of the operations managers with Top Standard Logistics. Today we are demonstrating coupling to a trailer, the proper procedures for doing so. We're also going to demonstrate how to slide your fifth wheel and proper fifth wheel placement for a dry van and a container. And then we're also going to demonstrate uncoupling from a trailer. So let's go ahead and begin. So today we are demonstrating how to properly identify the trailer you're to pick up and the steps that we use when hooking up to a trailer. So I would check my Relay app. I'm looking at the trailer number. This is the correct number associated with the trailer number in my Relay app. So now I am going to get set up so that I can back up to my trailer. I pull a little bit further ahead so that I can adjust as I'm backing. Stopping, neutral, reverse. And now I am slowly backing up so that I can make any adjustments needed to get lined up with the trailer that I am hooking up to. I also have the driver's side window down. That way I can hear if anyone yells out, if another driver honks their horn to warn me of something. What I am doing in backing up, I am lined up with the trailer. I am slowly backing up until the rearmost drive tires are underneath the front of the trailer. So now I'm gonna stop. I'm setting my parking brake. Truck in neutral. I am going to exit the truck, and when exiting the truck, I am using my 3 points of contact, climbing down off of the truck. I am looking at the trailer, and the trailer is higher than the fifth wheel. So to prevent high hooking, I am going to have to crank down the landing or crank up the landing gear so I can lower the front of the trailer until it seats firmly on that fifth wheel. Okay, now I can feel it's easier to turn the landing gear, so I'm beginning to take weight off of the trailer and place it onto the fifth wheel. Checking again. Getting back up the truck using my 3 points of contact. All right, I heard the click of the kingpin locking into the fifth wheel. So now I am going to perform a tug test to make sure that I'm securely attached. All right, tug test is good. Set my parking brake. Now I'm gonna get out, check it again, make sure that the kingpin is locked into the fifth wheel. This part, you need to go actually under the trailer. You want to visually check that your locking bar is locked in place properly to prevent the kingpin from sliding back. Everything looks good. The locking bar is in place. Okay. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and raise my landing gear before I hook to the trailer with my airlines and pigtail. We are now going to hook up our electrical pigtail and the airlines to the trailer. When I do this, I'm looking at my glad hand seals, make sure they're not dry rotted or cracked. These are good. The ones on the trailer are good. Looking at my pigtail connection, make sure it's not damaged. I like to hook the electrical pigtail in first. I can look, I've got lights from what I can see. Those are locked in place. One thing I'd like to add after hooking up your electrical pigtail and your airlines is to check the placement of these airlines. Make sure that they're up high enough. Unfortunately, with this truck, the spring hanger is a little worn out. That's why there's 3 spring hangers on here. Also, we have added the yellow electrical tape to these airlines, showing where the clamp placement should be. So I'm going to make those adjustments just so you can understand what I mean. This is for clamp placement should be here, especially for picking up containers. This other clamp would be hooked to this spring hanger if it was not broken. So for demonstration purposes only, we're going to show you the placement of it. So with the proper placement of the clamps and the spring hangers, as you can see, it keeps these airlines and electrical pigtail minimum 12 inches above the catwalk. Now I'm going to release my tractor parking brake so that when I do my walk around inspection of the trailer, I'm looking at all my lights and I'm also checking for any air leaks. So I'm looking at the trailer, just some very minor cosmetic damage. It's not, which is not a DOT defect. It does not cause an issue. Flashers on this side are good. Checking my tires. Make sure there's no defects on the tires. I'm also checking my slack adjusters, the first set and the second set, to make sure that they're both even on both sides. The one side's not out farther than the other. I'm checking my airbags. They're not dry rotted. There's no cracks, no punctures. I don't hear any audible air leaks. The ABS light is not on, which is a good sign. I'm checking the back. All my clearance lights and my 4-way flashers and running lights are in proper working order. And when I've done this, I'm also checking the DOT tape, making sure that there's a sufficient amount of it, that it's not torn off. This trailer could actually use a little bit more, but it still covers at least 50% of the trailer. At this point, I would finish up my inspection, submit it into my DBIR and relay, and then I could then continue on with my trip. All right, what we're gonna do next is I'm looking at the fifth wheel placement. And the fifth wheel placement is a little bit off. So I'm gonna need to adjust my fifth wheel so it's in proper placement. First thing we're gonna demonstrate is moving the fifth wheel for picking up a dry van. On these fifth wheel slides, there is an indicator right here. And it should be painted yellow. That should match up with the center of your fifth wheel. So as you can see, I need to move my fifth wheel forward a little bit for transporting this dry van. How we do that in the preferred method, which is going to work the same every time, no matter what type of truck that you're utilizing, the landing gear has to be fully cranked down. You need to turn it a few extra turns. That should be sufficient. It's firmly on the ground. You can feel the pressure with the kingpin still being locked into the fifth wheel. I'm gonna need to get back in the truck, turn my truck on, and I'll talk through these procedures as I do it. Okay, I'm well above 120 PSI. What I'm going to do is lower my airbags. So you'll see an icon on the dash that shows a day cab, and it's got an arrow running horizontally. That is for your fifth wheel pin release to slide your fifth wheel. So you have to push up on the button, then push in. I felt a little bit of a release, but not the sharp noise that you should hear when the pins are released. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to dump the airbags. And you'll see that switch is another day cab with an arrow running vertically. So I'm dumping the airbags. That is actually putting more weight with the kingpin and the fifth wheel, lifting the fifth wheel a little bit off of the slide. So now with the trailer fully on the ground, pressure released off of that fifth wheel, I should be able to reverse or pull forward depending on the direction that I want to move the fifth wheel. In this case, we want to move the fifth wheel just a few inches forward. Setting my brake, putting the truck in neutral. I'm gonna get out and check my fifth wheel placement. And we're right about where we need to be. I put the truck in reverse again. I am going to release my sliding fifth wheel. That will allow the pins to lock back into place. I'm gonna back up just enough that those pins lock in. All right, so felt the pins lock in. I'm gonna pull forward just to make sure. All right, everything's locked in place. I'm gonna get out now and ensure that the pins are fully locked in place. And as you can see, when I released the sliding fifth wheel lock so the pins could extrude and lock in, I did it in reverse and we lined up perfectly with the notch on the fifth wheel and the yellow marking line. You can see the pins are locked into place. I did a tug test and also ensured that the pins were locked into place. So that is the placement that you would need to be, the ideal placement for hauling a dry van trailer. Once again, we'll look at the airlines and the pigtail. They are still well above the catwalk. There's enough play in these spring hangers. They're designed to stretch quite a bit. So when you're making your turn, getting set up where the back of the truck actually is a little bit closer to the trailer, it's still going to keep your lines well above the catwalk. The next thing I'm going to demonstrate is how your airlines should be positioned when hooked to a container. I'm also going to demonstrate how to slide the fifth wheel all the way to the rear for picking up to a container. And just a quick observation to show you the difference, since we don't have a container today. You can see with dry vans, you've got 2.5 feet of clearance, so that when you're making turns to the left or the right, the landing gear and the bracing for the landing gear is not going to hit your mud flap and damage the mud flap. Okay, once again, I am going to release my sliding fifth wheel release. That'll allow the pins to move in. So I want to move the truck slowly forward. All right, once you feel resistance, you know that the fifth wheel is all the way to the rear. Put your truck in neutral, set your parking brake. Now you want to get out and look to ensure. One noticeable difference you can see is we've greatly increased the distance between your mud flap and the landing gear. Just by sliding the fifth wheel all the way to the rear, we've more than doubled the amount of space and clearance that we have. With containers, your landing gear is positioned closer to the front of your chassis. So in a container with the fifth wheel all the way to the rear, your landing gear is going to be about right here. And then you have that brace coming up. So it's only going to give you about 20 to 24 inches of clearance, which is sufficient provided you have your fifth wheel all the way to the rear. If you left your fifth wheel positioned where it was for the dry van, your landing gear are going to be about right here. And you're going to have a lot of issues when making turns because it's going to damage the mud flap and it's going to cut into your tire, your drive tire. So my fifth wheel is all the way to the rear. It will not move any further. I'm going to get back in the truck, release the sliding fifth wheel so that the pins lock into place. I'm going to check and make sure that they're locked into place. All right, I'm gonna pull forward, kind of like doing a tug test. Everything is good. Pins should be locked into place. Put the truck in neutral, setting the parking brake, and I am gonna get out and just double check to make sure. So looking at your fifth wheel, you can see the pins are locked back in place in the grooves where they should be. Fifth wheel is all the way to the rear. And that's where you want your fifth wheel position when you're picking up a chassis and container. Also want to point out again, with your airlines, you can see how much further they are up off of the catwalk with the distance we've increased by moving that fifth wheel. The yellow tape on here, this one is specifically for when picking up a container. The other one is for dry van. To make it easier for the drivers, we have added a third spring hanger to stay in these positions at all times. When you're making your turn, even when the front of your container and chassis is getting closer to the truck, these are going to retract, and the spring hangers are going to keep them well above the catwalk where they should be. That'll prevent any issues that you may have with getting airlines caught up on various parts of the truck, because as you turn, it becomes closer, they retract and keep everything up where they will be. Before leaving, I would let my airbags inflate and bring the trailer back up. Now I'm going to raise the landing gear until they're fully retracted, and then we can get back in the truck and we can continue on to our next destination. Okay, now we're going to demonstrate decoupling from your trailer after you've been assigned your parking slip, backed your trailer in. So I'm going to continue lowering the landing gear. I'm going to stop when the pads of the landing gear are on the ground. I'm going to crank it back at least 2 turns to lift the landing gear just 1/4 to a 1/2 inch off of the ground. So the foot pads have moved. That means I've got the landing gear off of the ground. The reason I'm doing this is that when I go to drop this trailer's going to be low enough so that when the next driver comes in to hook up to it, he should not have an issue with low hooking or high hooking when he connects to the trailer. I've completed my post-trip inspection. Everything's good, everything's functional, all the lights are working. I am now going to disconnect my lines and properly stow them. When I do this, I'm checking my glad hand seals, checking my glad hands to make sure everything is serviceable. There's no cuts, cracks, gaps. Doing the same thing with removing the pigtail. I'm checking it, making sure it's not damaged, not worn. And then it's a little hard to see here, but you want to make sure you put all your lines back where they should be. That way when you move, you're not going to have any issues with your airlines falling. I see a lot of drivers doing this. They're dropping a trailer and they're going to move halfway across the yard to pick up another one. So they leave them laying there. As they're turning, the truck's rattling. They drop down in here, they get caught in the drive tires, it rips everything off, puts you out of service. So you want to make sure they're properly stowed. I don't care if you're moving 5 feet, 10 feet, or 2 miles. You want to have them properly stowed. Once I've done that, Still checking, making sure nobody's come around my trailer. Everything looks good. I'm gonna go through the decoupling process. I'm gonna unlock the locking lever. You have to push up, push in, hold it down, make sure it stays in place. And then I'm going to dump my airbags. The reason for dumping the airbags is we gave a little bit of a gap from the pavement to the bottom of the landing gear foot pad. Lowering the airbags is going to put the trailer firmly on the ground, and it's going to prevent it from dropping in case the foot pads for the landing gear were a little bit too high. Putting the truck in drive. I'm going to slowly pull forward. Then I'm going to stop right here. I've stopped with my rear drive tires still under the trailer, so the front end of the trailer is still over the chassis for the truck and the fifth wheel. The reason for doing this is you want to make sure that your landing gear has not failed, that it has stayed in place. As you can see with the airbags up, there's enough of a gap there. The trailer is not lowering on its own. The landing gear is good and functioning as it should be. Now I can get back into my truck, pull out from underneath the trailer, and then I will lift the airbags before I would continue on to my next destination. Put the truck in drive and move forward just until I clear. Now I'm cleared. Set my parking brake, and I will reinflate the airbags. I can hear the airbags inflating. I'm doing a visual inspection to make sure that they're fully inflating, that there's no defects. As you can see, the rear chassis of the truck has raised up. And once you stop hearing any creaking noise from your airbags, it's a good indicator they're fully inflated and you're able to continue on driving. Just want to point out again that we did have to make adjustments to the fifth wheel, and it is still in the center position. Just as a reminder, this position here lined up with the pin for the tilt on your fifth wheel is where it should be, no further forward for picking up dry vans, and all the way to the rear when hooking up to a container. So once again, I'm Bill Waldron, one of the operations managers with Top Standard Logistics. What we've demonstrated today is coupling to a trailer, sliding your fifth wheel, proper placement of that fifth wheel, depending on whether you're picking up a dry van or a shipping container. We've also demonstrated the proper clamp and spring hanger placement on your airlines to keep them a minimum of 12 inches above the catwalk while you're transporting a dry van or container. The other thing that we demonstrate is the uncoupling procedures for when you're dropping off a dry van or a container. They're both very similar in nature. That's why we are using this dry van today for our demonstration.